out of COVID and things are changing, but people are still going to have a virtual life to them. Let's take a photo where we're completely honest about what we're doing. So I have this photo on my social media where it's me talking to the camera, and of course I have my suit jacket and my branded shirt and all that, and then on below I'm actually wearing booty shorts, which I guess you call yoga shorts, but I didn't realize they were too short, so you actually see what do you call them, biker shorts or whatever underneath. So anyway, it looks like I'm not wearing pants. Technically, by the nature of law, I am wearing clothing, but it is a little revealing perhaps, because that's my logic is I don't think that we need to be as presumptuous about things. Anyway, I can go on this, but I don't want to take away from Jeffrey and Theon today. So
Bob, I think it was very playful. I actually thought it was your underwear. It matters not. I recorded all of that so that you know that it's part of our transparent promoting your brand. I'm Dan Taylor. Welcome to the ECDev Network Friday, putting the I in IEDC. I'm going to hand it over to you, Bob, if you can hear me, hopefully. Sorry, did I disappear?
I think it may have started, Laura. So maybe.
Sorry.
Hey,
My
that's okay.
apologies, I think. I don't know, internet or whatever. Bob, thank you so much. This is the last session in our Economic Development Week, putting the I in IEDC. Over to you, Bob. Sorry about that.
No, not at all. Thank you, Dan. Yeah, I can hear a little bit of distortion, but we'll make it work. We know the session's recording. So before I hand it over to Lara, I just wanted to set the room for everybody. So welcome, everybody. As Dan said, welcome to the ECDev Network room. You are in the room where we're talking about putting the I in IEDC. And I will let Lara and Jeff talk about that acronym a little bit more, and Sion as well. But just to get those of you a little bit more comfortable, if you've never been here before, my name is Bob Minhas. I'm one of the co-hosts here today with Dan Taylor and Lara Fritz. And of course, we have amazing dedicated speakers on the stage as well. As I mentioned, the theme that we're talking about today. And just to be clear, the session today is being recorded. Dan is really great at leveraging this as a podcast for those who may have missed the event and want to listen to it after the fact. So if you haven't done so already yet, because of this topic, again, we've got some really amazing thought leaders on stage. Be sure to check out their bios and follow them. You'll probably find that the people generously sharing their knowledge today will be in other clubhouse rooms or other clubhouse clubs, if you will. And so you want to be able to get notified when they're sharing their knowledge elsewhere as well. If you think this is a really interesting and cool topic, please feel free to ping your friends. And to do so, on the bottom of the screen, you'll see a plus sign that allows you to ping anyone you're connected to, colleagues, friends, family, and invite them to the discussion, because Dan, Lara, and myself love making this a discussion. Certainly we have some featured speakers today, but I'm sure they'd appreciate hearing from other folks as well. So feel free to use that ping button as well. If you have a question or a comment, or you want to throw some of your own thoughts into the discussion as well, we'd love to hear from you. On the bottom of the screen, you'll see a hand icon with a notepad. If you press that indicates you're raising your hand, and myself, Dan, or Lara can invite you on stage and have you participate. Now, keep in mind, when we do bring you on stage, your mic will go on live. Juan, my apologies. I think I brought you on stage there by accident. Sorry about that. But if you want to hit mute on your phone, what'll happen is when you get on stage, as I've just indicated with Juan, your mic goes live. So you want to make sure that you're on mute so that you're not distracting from any of the other speakers as well. If you are on stage here, for those of you that are newer to Clubhouse, if you want to clap or show support for something, if you hit your mic button quick, as Lara's doing right now, that indicates clapping. That indicates acknowledgement of someone there. Thank you, Juan. If you want to participate, feel free to press and open and close the mic icon slowly, and that indicates that you have something to share, and then I can throw it to you there as well. If you haven't yet, if you this is your first time visiting the ECDev Network Club, please feel free to hit the bell icon so you can be notified of all our future events. Although we are celebrating International Economic Development Week this week, we do actually regularly host discussions here on Clubhouse on Wednesdays and Fridays. That being said, I don't think I've missed anything, Lara. Is there anything else you want to add, or should we kick it right off?
Let's kick it off. You are so good at making these introductions. I'm so grateful. Welcome, everyone, and I'm really excited to have Jeff Finkle join us. Jeff is the president and CEO of the International Economic Development Council, of which Sana, Juan, and I are board members. So we're going to help facilitate some of the conversation today. And what better way to wrap up Economic Development Week than to have the leader of IEDC join us. So thank you to everyone who's participating today. And with that, should we kick it off, Bob?
Yes, please. Would you like to take the first question? Would you like me to? How do we start here?
Sure. Well, why don't we have Sana as one of the board members kick off the conversation?
Wonderful.
Sana?
Do you mind if I throw in the first question, Lara? Is
Yeah,
that
please.
Sana? I'll make this one a little bit easy. Please tell us about what IEDC is. What does it stand for? What does it represent? What do you guys do? I'm sure there are those in the audience that have heard of it, but maybe not participated just yet.
Oh, wow. I think I'm actually going to kick it to Jeff Finkle to talk maybe about the IEDC. I would say I have benefited from the I in IEDC, and so I'll just kick it to Jeff, and maybe I could add to the conversation. Jeff.
Thanks, Sana. Now, as I begin my answer here, I do want to recognize some of the people that have joined us today. While I was kidding about Stephen Jest a few minutes ago, I saw Lee Malou here, who I met in Hamilton, Ontario. I hate to say how much wine we drank that night. And then we had another, that was at an EDAC, Economic Developers Association of Canada conference. We did the same in Newfoundland. Aaliyah is here today, who has supported IEDC courses. She has helped us at numerous times, and she is also not only monitoring this, we have an entrepreneurship session going on as well. So she is probably watching both her phone and her computer. IEDC, I'm going to answer it in two ways. One, this is our 95th anniversary. 95 years ago, 1926, the American Industrial Development Council was formed. And eventually it changed its name to the American Economic Development Council. In 1967, a group called the Hub Council, Helping Urban Businesses, was formed. It later changed its name to QED, the Council for Urban Economic Development. On May 8th, a few days, over 20 years ago, those two organizations merged to become the International Economic Development Council. How did IEDC get its name? I had something to do with that. I sat on the phone for a couple of days and I called the International Council of Shopping Centers, the International City Managers Associations, the International Downtown Associations, and asked them how they got started with their name having the word international in it. And it was almost always the same. Oh, we had a few Canadians starting to show up at conferences in the States, and that's what made them international. In all of those cases, they are more international today than they were before. But IEDC is the membership group for economic developers, those folks who are trying to create, retain, expand jobs, develop tax base, enhance wealth. They work for a variety of different organizations. In Canada, it tends to be more municipal organizations. In the States, it is city, county, states, as well as public private partnerships, a variety of different types of not for profit organizations. supporting either attraction-focused economic development, finance, technology-led economic development, business retention, and a fair amount around real estate. That's a long answer to a easy, short question, Sana, but that's how I talk about IEDC.
Wonderful, thanks, Jeff. And I know Juan Pablo, you are on the board, um, and I wondered if you might want to share just a little bit about kind of the how IDC has supported in your professional development, but also opportunities that you see with all around the international space.
Sure. Well, as a board member of IEDC, not only do I have a responsibility that is embedded with the position, but at the same time, I set it up on myself to actually engage more internationally, contact economic development organizations in multiple countries, and not just promote IEDC, but try to promote the profession as well. And through that line, we have been engaging in webinars with multiple economic development organizations in Colombia, for example, where we have one by the early June. This is not a full webinar course. This is just this is what the economic development profession is. This is what economic development organizations are doing around, and why you should join IEDC. But it's interesting just to understand and get to know how other economic development organizations in different world regions are approaching economic development. So it is different models. I do believe that the, I guess, North American model is more oriented towards a political, not towards an economic policy model, rather than other models that are based on the UNDP model, which is more social policy mixed with economic policy, which is a little bit different. But it just provides a perspective on how economic development is approached internationally.
If I can add something, one is the first board member IEDC has had from Mexico, and he was recently the vice chair of our international committee.
And to that end, Jeff, we've tagged this particular session "Putting the I in IEDC." Share with us maybe a little bit about some of the work that IEDC is doing internationally, and as you have international economic developers on this call, what would you want them to know on how IEDC can help them?
So, IEDC has done a variety of things over many years. I would chart the true internationalization of IEDC back to 1995. That would be QED at that time. In 1995, we hosted a lunch at our annual conference, which was held in Dallas, Texas, and we had economic developers from Scotland, England, Canada, Australia, I forget, Belgium, and we we were starting to see a grander interest in how the United States actually undertakes economic development. That was further enhanced that year at the Economic Developers Association of Canada's annual conference, which would have been in Winnipeg, Manitoba, where we did an MOU. We called that INED, the International Network of Economic Developers. From there, IEDC has done a lot of various things, from doing technical assistance under the United Nations banner in China. We have done economic development training for people from Eastern Europe through a program at the U.S. Department of Commerce or State, I forget which, called SABIT. We have developed and helped develop a certification program in South Africa. We were also working on a certification program in one of the Eastern Europe countries. Um, the other things that IEDC does is our chair or one member of our governance committee tends to act as an ambassador at the World Association of Investment Promotion Agencies, or EURATA, the European Association of Regional Development Organizations, EDAC, EDANS, Economic Developers Association New Zealand, or the Economic Developers Association of Australia. I've also spoken at the Economic Development Group in France, even though I don't speak French. And we've also done a number of things with the OECD. We have, for Canadians, all of our training manuals are written for the Canadian marketplace at this point, meaning they are relevant. The United States has some unique economic development programs, the SBA 504, for instance, that's worthless in Canada. So all of those have been taken out. So I think somebody who comes to an IEDC conference or event is going to see one other international attendees, but they're also going to see an economic development regime that is based in the United States that is fairly high level. Not to say that what they're bringing with them is not also high level, but they can compare and contrast their programs to how things are being done in the United States.
Perfect. So, I think one thing, Jeff, that we would love to hear from you, you sit in such a great position that you work with economic developers across the globe. What are some of the best practices that you're seeing for economic development right now, especially in light of COVID and, the social justice movement that's happening?
So I'm going to answer that question a little differently at first. And while I think we do economic development in the States fairly sophisticated, not all of our programs are best in class. For instance, the whole idea of micro enterprise came out of Bangladesh. And we have tried to emulate the micro enterprise programs there. Some of the early cluster work came out of the Emilia Romagna region of Italy. Um, Opportunity Zones is essentially a takeoff from Empowerment Zones Enterprise Communities, which came out of Enterprise Zones, which was a program that the Thatcher administration utilized in Great Britain. And if we look at foreign trade zones uh, or zones generally, I think across the continent or across the world, excuse me, zones tend to be a lot stronger than they necessarily are here in the United States. However, at the same time, local economic development, I think, tends to be a little stronger here because in many countries, uh, there is not a fight for local revenue. So if you went to Great Britain, the country, the national government collects most of the money and then redistributes it. Here in the States, uh, the federal government does collect money, but there's not as much money coming back from the federal government to local governments. And so your local police department, some of your local programs around housing the homeless and stuff is actually, if you've got reasonably good income, you support those things in a strong way. If you don't, you're out of luck. And so that is what perpetuated the great number of economic development organizations in the States and had everything to do with if you didn't compete well, you lost out. And so as a result, we have a lot of different types of programs. In terms of better practice in COVID, I'm not sure I've seen one economic development organization or one country do that much better than another. Now, I would say that there are countries that manage to do masking, separation, and closure better than we've done in the States. But in terms of helping their economies recover, I'm not as confident about that. In terms of the whole justice movement, I think we're doing pretty well. I was on an OECD conference call webinar a couple months ago, and I was the only one talking about it. And there were people from throughout Europe, and I don't think they address those issues in quite the same way we do.
Guys, I'm wondering if I could chime in. Thank you, Jeff. That was great. I've been really fortunate to have a couple of on the ground experiences in developing countries, Philippines, Ukraine, and South Africa. And one of the things I find is I'm going to call it best practices. So, um, I'm not going to get into the politics because all three countries have corrupt governments. So I'm not quite sure how to effectively uh, implement economic development when the countries are corrupt and the currencies are and all the other variables are there. But the people and the issues are kind of the same. So in Philippines, I spent two-week sessions over a 24-month period working with the folks there. Very smart, very capable folks. But I don't want to say not necessarily understanding. Like my background, I come from an entrepreneurial private sector background, you know, and that lens, I think, really helps in economic development. And in some of the developing countries, South Africa, kind of the same. Ukraine, I'm a little less clear on, but I think kind of the same is because of people look at government and government policy and whatnot, which are all part of the process. Sometimes because they don't have the background or the experience, they don't necessarily understand how to harness the power of a little extra creativity, a little extra entrepreneurship, and are almost looking for maybe too much direction from senior levels, whether that's government or what have you. I don't know, Jeff, or anybody for that matter, if people can compare and contrast that to if anyone else has some international experience or just even the way things are done in North America primarily, who's on our audience, I'd be interested to see that. I know for me, I've found that it's a little less leadership oriented and a little more waiting to be led. I suspect the U.S. is like Canada, where there's lots of leadership, and and we're not waiting to be led. I'll put it out there on the floor. I'm Dana. I'm done speaking.
Well, I think one of the ways that we can lead as economic developers is by the training that we get, the professional development. Um, Jeff, I saw your mic come off.
So, Dan, I did some work in Bulgaria. So I've been to South Africa and did a fair amount, and we did a fair amount of technical assistance in China. And I think you're right on that there is some level of expectation that the national government will solve all problems. The other thing that I think I've noticed in those places is not unlike some places, probably in Canada or the United States, they're all looking for that big win. They're looking for one big company to show up and employ lots of people without necessarily thinking about how they can grow their own. Um, not a lifestyle business, not a service business, but is there a way to um, help grow, second stage entrepreneurs, for instance? How do you grow that type of entrepreneur in your region, as opposed to just sitting around and waiting for something to land in your lap? Um, and I think, unfortunately, our own State Department, as they locate in USAID, I think they train some of these local economic developers in less developed countries to expect that as well.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, I agree, and I guess partly what I'm getting at, partly my background, but I've seen it in a lot of great communities in Canada and the U.S. in particular, which I'm more familiar with, is those that have a bit of an entrepreneurial or not trying to bag the elephant or whatever the right terminology is, but have small, regular, incremental wins where there are fewer barriers as well, right? That seems to be um, a good part of the mix, and hopefully over time as a profession we can help train our counterparts overseas, with some of these skill sets as well as part of best practices. I'm Dan and done speaking.
I think Lee's trying to say something, but I do want to recognize the woman in sunglasses that just showed up. Another IEDC board member, Danielle Casey, has arrived, and our board is strongly here today. Lee, you were trying to get in.
You bet. But it's such a good conversation. First of all, hello, everyone. Great to see so many colleagues. And you, Jeff, it's been a little while since I've seen you in person. And just want to quickly say that I've certainly witnessed over the last few decades the lifetime of work that you've invested and been very passionately committed to in continuing to elevate the profession, and have been to many of your events, including the international dinners, and always appreciate how you've always taken a very inclusive approach to ensuring that anybody who's there, regardless of their region or global region, is always a welcome part of that family. So thank you for that. Um, Also, I just want to, I think, Dan, you really hit that in terms of differentiating, and you can see this in different countries. I think most of us have worked in multiple global regions in doing this work, and we see this at home, we
My
see this
internet.
on the continent, we see this in other regions, of the world, depending on the state of where the development of the profession is. But you can always recognize somebody at the local level who really understands that the work of economic development is really an entrepreneurial mindset, an entrepreneurial approach to the business. And it's always a bit of a challenge for entrepreneurs in those roles to work, almost always within a government context, and try and make sure that they're always walking that fine line between being an entrepreneur and being an official that represents government interests, and always trying to find the balance, between and amongst all those different entities that are, sometimes have conflicting interests, including upper levels of government that, over the years we've learned not to rely on for the leadership necessarily, but definitely to rely on for the support. And sometimes you can and sometimes you can't, depending on your jurisdiction, but certainly rely on our partners and other levels of government for support when we ourselves are taking the leadership at our local level. So great conversation. And this is Lee, and I'm done.
Bob, can I throw it back to you?
Sure. Yeah, we've got a lot of new folks who've joined us on stage, which is great. So I'd love to just really quickly reset the room because, again, we've also had some folks join us throughout the conversation. It is an amazing conversation we're having today. I have to tell you, I'm loving it. But for those of you that are sort of new to the club, welcome to the ECDev Network here on Clubhouse. If you haven't yet, you will see a little bell icon beside the ECDev Network name. Feel free to click that, and that'll notify you when we're having future events as well. Although we're celebrating International Economic Development Week, we do actually have these chats on a regular basis weekly. My name is Bob Minhas. My co-hosts here are Dan Taylor and Lara Fritz, and we have some amazing speakers here on stage as well. For those that aren't aware, this session is being recorded. Dan is really great at reusing what we share here in a podcast later for those who perhaps missed the event. So if you haven't had a chance yet, as Jeff has pointed out, we have some amazing leaders here on the stage. Make sure to check out their bio, make sure to follow them, because if they're going to be participating in other Clubhouse rooms and sharing their amazing knowledge there, you want to make sure that you're not missing out on that as well. For those of you on stage, if you're a little bit newer to Clubhouse, just a couple of housekeeping items. If you hear something you really like, if you press the mute button on and off quickly, that indicates clapping. If you do that pressing it slowly, it indicates you have something to share, and Lara, myself, or Dan can pull you back up on stage. For those in the audience, if you have a question, if you want to jump on stage, we'd love to hear from you. You'll actually see a little hand icon with a notepad on the bottom. If you press that and raise your hand, myself, Lara, or Dan can bring you to the stage and then ensure that you have an opportunity to share. Just keep in mind, when we do bring you to stage, your mic goes live. So as soon as you jump on, you want to hit that mute button right away so you don't interrupt perhaps some of the other speakers sharing. A little tip for our speakers on stage: when you're sharing some knowledge, if you're done with that share, feel free to just share your name again and just let us know you're done speaking. So for example, I'm Bob and I'm done speaking. That allows other speakers on the stage to know when they can jump in. But also, it acts as a pretty good accessibility tool because not everyone listens to us on the traditional iPhone app anymore. I think that's pretty much about it. We've covered it all, Laura. Was there anything I missed? I think we're good.
No, it was a great reset, and I always appreciate you doing that.
Love it.
Perfect.
Great.
Dan, did you want to ask the next question?
Actually, I would love for Alia maybe to come up and share a little bit of her background and her thoughts on the discussion. I've seen her active on LinkedIn, so this would be a great opportunity for me to get to know her a little bit better. And I'm sure she's got some great thoughts. And Jeff gave her kudos, so I'd go there.
Great. Alia, did you have a question?
Nope.
Okay, would you like to share?
Sure.
Perfect.
Sorry, I'm just like new to this, so I'm just seeing the mic button and I'm just pressing that. So, yeah, my name is Alia
Perfect.
Abbas, and I joined IEDC in 2014 when I was doing my undergrad and kind of like at the end of my undergrad, which I was looking at disaster emergency management. And my thought was always about, I come from a background in geography and urban studies, so we learned a lot about cities and rural cities and looking at policies around development. And I'm like, okay, this is all great. I learned how to develop a city, but what if my city were to go under a major disaster? But then I got a lot of feedback from my professors like, oh, Aaliyah, this is not like a Canadian issue in terms of the disasters. We don't have it at that level as the States. So my thought was more so along the lines of, youth leaving a community, because I noticed that in urban planning, the youth tend to leave and they go to the larger centers. So from that, I was looking at, how do you attract and who are the major players for that? Because there's the business continuity specialists, but they focus more on looking at plans and reviewing it for smaller businesses and providing them support. So then afterwards, I ended up doing my master's. And then when I first did my master's, they didn't have any programming in economic development. They're like, oh, you probably have to go to another university and take courses there. So I started Googling and trying to figure out, economic development, what is it about? And I came across IEDC. And I was very fortunate because that was the first time, I think, in 2014 in Toronto, they were offering a course, Introduction to Economic Development. So I signed up and I was like, okay, this is a good short course and I can quickly get a feel for what economic development is all about. I met Jeff there for the first time and I shared the discussion of what I was facing in terms of my school and my program. And I was assigned the task of looking at university, industry, and government relationships. So looking at, they wanted me to look at the role of planners. And I felt like, the people that kind of market the, community is not the city planner. And then also disaster emergency management people usually would come at the end to evaluate the land if it were to be chosen or selected by the planner, and then tell you, like, if it's good land or not, based on their land use or zoning bylaws. So they said, no, it's actually the economic developer that makes those presentations. So I told my professor, I'm like, it's the economic developer. They're like, what is that? Is that an economist? So I said, no, economic developer are kind of like the right hand man to the mayor. They're the ones that Every time I sent an email out and I asked for an interview, they said, talk to our director of economic development. He knows what we're doing, or she knows what we're doing. I have no idea. I just get speaking points, and then I make the final decision of whether to we're getting the university campus or not. So when I spoke to that, then I realized that the economic developer has many different hats, and a lot of people know about that field. So I wanted to explore it further in terms of economic recovery. What if your university campus were to shut down? And that's something that we saw with the pandemic, where a lot of online courses being offered, not a lot of students wanting to be on campus, and campuses closing down. Um, and overall, I'm just seeing that in terms of investment attraction and getting my opportunity with Toronto Global as a consultant, I'm seeing that investment attraction is also being hit hard by this in terms of supply chain. Looking at smaller businesses, where they're getting their products from. Are the universities getting the talent that they want? And what is going to be the new talent? What is the new latest programs or skill sets that the employers need? Everything's kind of questionable right now. And those are the challenges. And that's the type of background I'm coming from and experiences I'm bringing forth to economic development. And I'm really excited.
That's perfect. Thank you so much, Alia. And I absolutely loved how she's utilizing IEDC from Canadian perspective to grow her career. And a big congratulations to Alia. I don't know if anyone knows, but she recently had some of her resiliency work put into one of the new IEDC books. Do you want to talk ever so briefly about that?
Yeah. So that one was a cool project. That also came out from the conference and just networking, and that's what I love about IEDC, is that it's a larger platform, a lot of members from different backgrounds, and they're all trying to support. And they give advice. That's the thing. I like it that there's no competition, or like they don't want to share their ideas. It's more so I'm willing to share my idea because it's going to help your community and it doesn't affect me. I feel like other disciplines or other fields are not like that. You are technically competing with one another and you don't want to share your ideas. Versus economic development, no other economic developer wants to see another economic developer suffering, because they're well connected, they're next to each other. So for that, I reached out to Josh Mejia, and Josh Mejia is from Brownsville, Texas, and he connected with me on entrepreneurship. And he was like, "Oh yeah, what are you looking at?" So I'm like, "I'm looking at business continuity, loss of talent, workforce. What are you looking at?" He's like, "I look at entrepreneurs." So I said, "Yeah, that's a cool thing because we're missing out on entrepreneurs in our community, and where do we place them?" So he said, let's connect and let's talk to one another about, what you're looking at. So I said, I really want to advocate business continuity planning into plans before, because I noticed that, even through IDC, being offered the opportunity to do the disaster recovery program, which I would recommend other people to join and be a volunteer. That
Agreed.
Yeah, because I learned from that, from Lynn Haven, Florida, with Hurricane Michael and Hurricane Irma. A lot of the businesses were saying, oh yeah, like we had larger major corporations leave. They dipped as soon as we got hit by the hurricane, and the smaller businesses were the ones that stayed. But they're the only ones that don't have a business continuity plan, and they can have an exit strategy versus a large corporation like KFC or the hotels, or even the Walmart. They said we can leave. So that's something that I found interesting, and I started talking, and then Josh mentioned that he was creating this course that IDC is working on. So I said, "Oh, cool!" And then he connected me to Kate, and then I talked about why business continuity is an important aspect, because I studied that all throughout my undergrad. But being able to make that connection with economic development is really helpful.
That is wonderful. And, Jeff is so good about making sure that economic developers have those connections. I know, Bob, you had a question.
Yes, thank you. This is such an amazing topic, and I'm learning so much. I wanted to throw this question out there, and I'm happy to start with anyone on the floor right now. About 2 or 3 years ago, our provincial ministry did a study. It was mostly focused around our accelerators and small business enterprise centers, which in some communities is tied directly to economic development. And what we discovered was, it was, I guess in our industry, you'd call it scathing, but it basically indicated that this was pre COVID, this is a couple of years ago, that we weren't preparing our business owners and entrepreneurs for global business. And so my question to the floor is, how can we as economic development officers, if you have any advice or any best practices, how can we best prepare our business community to do business globally? So I'd again love to just throw that out to
Oh, that's such a good question. Jeff, can we start with you?
Sure. So, I, a number, we've actually did a training program for the Edison Electric Institute a number of years ago when utility companies uh, who had traditionally helped finance in the States, had helped finance the foreign direct investment trips that were taken by economic development delegations. And they stopped and they said, we're doing this, but we're losing a lot. We're going over, we're swinging, we're striking out when we go over to try to recruit businesses. We need to have a second thing to do. And the second thing they decided to do was to start selling local products. And then they realized that many of their companies were not uh, export ready, and that tends to be the term that gets used a great deal. So there, in the meantime, there have been a number of publications. We did one many years ago on export ready, but we have a responsibility to help get our small manufacturers or that um, that have the capability of selling outside of their region, outside of their state, to also consider exporting outside the country. But you also don't want to take them a cliff too far. You don't want to say, well, let's prepare your stuff in 18 languages. Maybe we ought to get them to sell to Canada or Canadian firms to sell the United States first before they take on Mexico, Colombia, Chile, Turkey, and everybody else. It is a slow, iterative business when you do that.
Jeff, you hit on two key points that I'm so excited about. One, market readiness, which our clubhouse chat on Wednesday, the 19th, is going to be about market readiness. And then our clubhouse chat on the 21st is with our friend Lee and Juan, who are up on the stage right now. We're going to be talking about strengthening North American trade, which I'm really excited about. Other people who want to answer Bob's question about how do we encourage our entrepreneurs to become engaged in the global market. Bob, did I surmise your question
you.
accurately?
Yes, and I think it's something that we have been working on, but with COVID hitting, it's, I think for a lot of communities, it's fell on the back shelf for sure.
Lee, Juan, I know that this is sort of your areas of expertise. Would you like to jump in?
Sure, I'd love to. I mean, this is such a juicy, juicy question. We could probably spend a lot of time on it. But I think that's one of the most important things. And Laura already mentioned we're going to have a much bigger conversation about this next Friday. And it's really going to start getting down to what is our role as economic development professionals at the local level in supporting our entrepreneurs in entering, de-risked area of doing business in a global environment that we know has a lot of, potential conflicts and areas of problems in terms of trade problems for a lot of our entrepreneurs that are a little gun shy right now with COVID. So, a lot of the work that we're doing is working with our clients to develop a little bit of a careful re-entry plan. And again, coming back to what we were talking about earlier, certainly in Canada and I know in the US, and Juan, I'm sure you could speak to the programs in Mexico, but there are fantastic programs that we continually lever that help to de-risk market entry for our entrepreneurs and businesses, and they are invaluable and they are always the first stop, in terms of helping our companies and our clients start to enter that marketplace. And certainly I see Steve is here and you might be able to speak also to the fact that having really solid data is part of having a good understanding of your marketplace before you even start to enter that. So So those are some of the basics that we're always looking at in preparing, with our clients and our colleagues.
Oh, Lee, that's fantastic. And Steve, I did notice you came up. Did you have a question for Jeff, or did you want to add to the conversation?
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Lara. Jeff, I really wanted to say hi. I haven't chatted in a while, and I saw you were on the call, and certainly I wanted to listen, but I've kind of been in other meetings, and I've been listening to the conversation with one ear and sort of participating in some of my meetings with another ear. But, great conversation, as always, Lara, and Dan and Bob and Juan, good to see you, and everybody else. Aaliyah, hi, how you doing? But no, nothing really specifically to add. Of course, data is important, and from our perspective, and as it relates to international trade, we're always very curious about trying to identify where there are, clusters of growth, and we're all about trying to identify growth opportunities. But I'm just happy to kind of sit back and listen. But thanks so much for Lara for inviting me to talk.
Of course, good to see you.
Yeah, you as well.
Danielle, I'm coming over to you. Um, Welcome to the stage. Would you like to add to the conversation?
Hi, Laura. Hi, everyone. I just want to say that I'm showing my age by just trying to figure out how to use Clubhouse. So you're definitely an amazing early adopter. Just wonderful to listen in to everyone. Wish you all a great weekend. I don't have anything to contribute at this time, but I appreciate the stage. I'm finished. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Jeff, another question that I would have for you is you've done such a great job of making connections with the federal government agencies for domestic U.S. Economic development professionals. Since we do have a number of friends here from Canada and Mexico, I'd just be curious as to how you engage the governments of other countries into IEDC.
So I would say we probably haven't done a great job um, with the national government in Canada or the national government in Mexico. Our connections in both of those places have been primarily with their local economic developers and, in some cases, state or provincial economic developers. As one knows, we did have a relationship with the Mexico had a an economic development group that had a fairly large office here in Washington D.C. And what happens with governments from time to time is they abolish the organization, and so Mexico has been trying to, and they probably have it solved by now, but they probably have a new FDI organization. In fact, our conversations with that office is they were going to have IEDC help train local economic developers. I've dealt for many years with folks at the Canadian Embassy here in Washington, D.C., but not at the same levels that we have in terms of our federal government. We have connections typically at the deputy secretary level at Commerce. Select USA, we are considered one of their most important constituency groups, and we deal with the people at the XM Bank and other entities within the federal government.
And how do you utilize those connections to um, partner them with your economic development professionals that are members?
So we were very early supporter of what was called Invest in America, that later changed their name to Select USA, and the way we worked with them is we actually encouraged many state and local economic development organizations to actually come and become exhibitors at Select USA's big event. In fact, I see Stephen still here. That is, frankly, the first time Stephen and I spent any time together was at a Select USA event. And but we've, as a result of us introducing Select USA to a number of economic development organizations. Many of them have gone on missions with Select USA. They've engaged with Select USA when they were trying to recruit a company. What we've also found out is that, frankly, many economic developers from outside the United States has also desired to have a relationship with Select USA, and in some cases we've helped facilitate some of that as well.
Fantastic. Dan, I saw your mic come off. Did you have a question?
I wanted to build a little bit on Bob's question, and thanks, Jeff, for sharing with us the international connections, and I think it's fascinating, and I know it's challenging, and while it probably makes a whole lot of sense to be connected to those senior levels of government, I think your connection certainly in Canada to EDAC and EDCO and others, that I mean that's where a lot of the action happens. So I think that's really positive. Bob, I think one of the challenges about working with local companies on, let's forget COVID for a moment and let's just pretend it's a normal time. With companies, to go global, if you're not talking about significant entities, but smaller and medium-sized enterprises, I guess the good news is most of them are like busy and hopefully somewhat profitable, and they're growing their business, and therefore maybe unfortunately not having that vision of expansion because they've got their eye sort of on the short-term prize. And then the thing I struggle with is, certainly as economic developers, yes, we want our companies to expand and go global. And maybe it's easier for us to have that vision because we have a vision of the economy. But it's one of those things, right? You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. So I think the key is in our business retention and expansion work is to identify those handful of companies, whatever that magic number is in our community, that want to and that are ready and have the drive and the desire, and then to pull out all the stops, whether we have the expertise or we have to pull in the expertise. And I think that's where we could make some really good gains, is maybe in the incremental, in the 1%, in the 5%, in the 10%. And even, I think, Jeff was suggesting not try to go global, meaning, 10 or 20 countries, but pick one or two and then grow from there. So I think maybe that's the best opportunity for us as economic developers. I'm Dan, and I'm done speaking.
That's such a great point. And it's so hard to believe how fast this hour has gone. It is almost 4 o'clock, and I know that our friends at IEDC are having a happy hour at 4 to wrap up what has been an exciting economic development week. So, Bob, if it's okay with you, I'm going to throw it back to you to wrap us up for today.
Yes, thank you, Laura. What an amazing discussion. I certainly, again, as I've said before, I've learned a lot, and I'm hoping all of you in the audience have learned as well. I want to thank you on behalf of Laura and Dan for being here in the audience, for being here the whole time and contributing with your questions. I especially want to acknowledge Jeff and Juan and Sion and Aliyah, and of course Lee, for contributing some amazing thoughts, and always great to see you here, Steve, as well. This does, as Lara mentioned, end our week of wonderful celebration for International Economic Development Week, but this does not end our ability to connect and stay and chat. Next Wednesday, Dan and I and Lara is hosting another room when we're back on our regular schedule at 12 p.m. Eastern. So if you haven't yet joined the room or followed us on LinkedIn, please, or you have associates who want to join us, be sure to send us a DM if they need a Clubhouse invite now on Android. And that's really all I have to share from there. Dan, did you want to contribute some last thoughts before we end?
I think my last thoughts are what a great week we've had. I believe IEDC is the originator of Economic Development Week, so thank you for giving us that. Thank you, Jeff, for giving us your time, and for some of the board members coming on board. Juan, I think Danielle, Sion, Lara, and some others if I've missed them. And I just feel that we've got a nice little thing going on here where we've got great conversations. So we encourage you folks to spread the word that this is a great place to have great best practice and networking and conversations about the profession. I'm Dan, and I'm
Great.
done
And
speaking.
if it's okay, Jeff, do you have any last things you'd like to share with us?
No, we actually are having a Economic Development Week happy half hour. So if you have your email from us, click on it and come join us for the next half hour. And we're going to be talking about what IEDC has been up to, preparing for Nashville, where our annual conference will be held in person in October.
Yay!
And yay, is right. I'll be able to actually see people for once, other than over a Zoom call or this vehicle. So thank you ever so much for having me, Sana, Laura, Dan, Bob, and it's good to see so many of my other friends.
The audience for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you next Wednesday at noon to talk about market readiness. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye bye. Thanks, everybody.